I want to start this video by saying I don't know if I will be able to complete it because anything that could go wrong today did go wrong. So in the morning we had our hot water fixed, and then they told us our heating is really bad too. So now there are people in the basement fixing the radiator system. You know, we have a very old house that is almost 180 years old. Also, my daughter has 2 teenage girls over, so you might hear some laughing and screaming. And you know, my husband went to work just now and he's like, bye baby, you can handle it. And there's a tow truck outside, which luckily is not for us, but still I was like, wow, what a day, what a day. But I decided that I'm still going to try to film this video. Wish me good luck. I hope it will happen. I might have to film half of it and then finish on another day. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving, so I don't think I'll film tomorrow. Maybe Black Friday. And on a positive note, the lighting is absolutely remarkable today, right? All right, let's get it started. Are you highly sensitive? A self-test. I seem to be aware of subtleties in my environment. Other people's moods affect me. I tend to be very sensitive to pain. I find myself needing to withdraw during busy days, into bed or into a darkened room, or any place where I can have some privacy and relief from stimulation. I am particularly sensitive to the effects of caffeine. I am easily overwhelmed by things like bright lights, strong smells, coarse fabrics, or sirens close by. I have a rich, complex inner life. I am made uncomfortable by loud noises. I am deeply moved by the arts or music. I am conscientious. I startle easily. I get rattled when I have a lot to do in a short amount of time. When people are uncomfortable in a physical environment, I tend to know what needs to be done to make it more comfortable, like changing the lighting or the seating. I am annoyed when people try to get me to do too many things at once. I try hard to avoid making mistakes or forgetting things. I make it a point to avoid violent movies and TV shows. I become unpleasantly aroused when a lot is going on around me. Being very hungry creates a strong reaction in me, disrupting my concentration or mood. Changes in my life shake me up. I notice and enjoy delicate or fine scents, tastes, sounds, works of art. I make it a high priority to arrange my life to avoid upsetting or overwhelming situations. When I must compete or be observed while performing a task, I become so nervous or shaky that I do much worse than I would otherwise. When I was a child, my parents or teachers seemed to see me as sensitive or shy. If you answer true to 12 or more of the questions, you're probably highly sensitive. But frankly, no psychological test is so accurate that you should base your life on it. If only 1 or 2 questions are true of you, but they are extremely true, you might also be justified in calling yourself highly sensitive. Hello, creative buddies. I'm Daria, textile and surface pattern designer, educator and artist, both traditional and digital. On this channel we talk all things textile, pattern, color and artwork, creative motivation, creative struggles, and books for creatives. So today I want to review one of them. It's called The Highly Sensitive Person: How to Thrive When the World Overwhelms You by Elaine N, PhD. Why am I making this video? Because as you might guess, I'm a highly sensitive person myself. It took me a while to realize it and to embrace it, and I think that actually many creative people are indeed highly sensitive. In that questionnaire that I just read to you, I answered positively to most of those questions. Let me read the ones that I can particularly well relate to. So for example, things like I seem to be aware of subtleties in my environment, I find myself needing to withdraw during busy days, I'm uncomfortable when I hear loud noises, I get rattled when I have a lot to do in a short amount of time, I make it a point to avoid violent movies and TV shows, so this is all me. And I notice and enjoy delicate or fine scents, tastes, sounds, works of art. And when I must be observed, I perform worse than I would normally do. You know, sometimes you have to do a demo in front of the class or in front of someone, and you're just startled and you start making mistakes even though you know very well what you're doing. So being an HSP, highly sensitive person, affects all spheres of my life, especially my creativity. And for a very long time, I felt like something is wrong with me, and I kept asking myself why I can't be like other people. But actually coming to terms with being different liberated me. Being highly sensitive is not a bug in the system, it's a feature to be aware of. And when you know yourself well, you can arrange your life in the way it works best for you and doesn't aggravate your life path. So the purpose of this video is to support those who might also identify as highly sensitive, to share tools to organize your life better, discuss the reasons for being the way we are, and give hope. If you aren't subscribed yet, please take a second to do it and like this video if the topic sounds relatable. So let's go chapter by chapter. The book has 10 of them. It was originally written in 1996, and this one I'm holding is from 2020, and it's the 25th anniversary edition with a new foreword that includes new research data on highly sensitive people. The author of the book, Elaine N, has a PhD in clinical psychology and lives in the San Francisco Bay Area, the United States. So here she is. The first chapter is called The Facts About Being Highly Sensitive, a Wrong Sense of Being Flawed. It tells us basic facts about this trait and how it makes HSPs different from others. HSPs often show the first signs in childhood. For example, they dislike the noisy environment in daycare or at school. And there is an example in the book about a woman named Kristen who was very distressed as a kid when, at kindergarten they had to pound on pots and pans as a game. And kids were excited, but she would just cover her ears and cry. So at the time she was screened for mental illness. People thought something was wrong with her, but they actually found out that she was gifted and not delayed in a certain way. But the doctor also concluded that she was easily overstimulated, and that is very common for highly sensitive people. Most people ignore sirens, glaring lights, strange odors, clutter, and chaos. HSPs are disturbed by them. Most people's feet may be tired at the end of a day in a mall or a museum, but they're ready for more when you suggest an evening party. HSPs need solitude after such a day. They feel jangled, over-aroused. Most people walk into a room and perhaps notice the furniture, the people. That's about it. HSPs can be instantly aware. Here it goes. Whether they wish to be or not, of the mood, the friendships and enmities, the freshness or still. It was a bad idea to film today. The freshness or staleness of the air, the personality of the one who arranged the flowers. If you are an HSP, however, it is hard to grasp that you have some remarkable ability. How do you compare inner experiences? Not easily. Mostly you notice that you seem unable to tolerate as much as other people. You forget that you belong to a group. As a highly sensitive person, I'm very offended by these noises. You probably would think that a highly sensitive person wouldn't film in these conditions, but I just kept putting off this video for so long that I was like, today is the day and I'm doing it regardless. Alright. You forget that you belong to a group that has often demonstrated great creativity, insight, passion, and caring, all highly valued by society. We are a package deal, however. Our trait of sensitivity means we also can be cautious, inward, needing extra time alone, because people without the trait, the majority, do not understand that. They see us as timid, shy, weak, or that greatest sin of all, unsociable. Fearing these labels, we try to be like others, but that leads to our becoming over-aroused and distressed. Then that gets labeled neurotic or crazy, first by others and then by ourselves. The two facts to remember about high sensitivity discussed in this chapter is one, that everyone, HSP or not, feels best neither too bored nor too aroused, because too much arousal of the nervous system makes people distressed, clumsy, and confused, while too little arousal leaves one dull and ineffective. The second thing is that people differ considerably in how much their nervous system is aroused in the same situation, under the same stimulation. The difference is largely inherited and is very real and normal. In fact, it can be observed in all higher animals: mice, cats, dogs, horses, monkeys, humans. What this difference in arousability means is that you notice levels of stimulation that go unobserved by others. This is true whether we are talking about subtle sounds, sights, or physical sensations like pain. It is not that your hearing, vision, or other senses are more acute. plenty of HSPs wear glasses. The difference seems to lie somewhere on the way to the brain or in the brain, in a more careful processing of information. We reflect more on everything, and we sort things into finer distinctions. Like those machines that grade fruit by size, we sort into 10 sizes, while others sort into 2 or 3. I like this analogy. This greater awareness of the subtle tends to make you more intuitive, which simply means picking up and working through information in a semi-conscious or unconscious way. The result is that you often just know without realizing how. Furthermore, this deeper processing of subtle details causes you to consider the past or future more. Hello, depression and anxiety, right? I just saw a new therapist yesterday, and she was telling me that, people who worry more about the past are prone to depression, and people who worry more about the future are prone to anxiety. And I thought I have both, and I was actually kind of diagnosed with depression, but she's like, no, you actually have more anxiety than depression. You just know how things got to be the way they are, or how they're going to turn out. That is that sixth sense people talk about. It can be wrong, of course, just as your eyes and ears can be wrong, but your intuition is right often enough that HSPs tend to be visionaries, highly intuitive artists or inventors, as well as more conscientious, cautious, and wise people. That sounds good, right? The downside of the trait shows up at more intense levels of stimulation. What is moderately arousing for most people is highly arousing for HSPs. I can definitely relate to this very much. For example, my husband really likes listening music super loud, and he really enjoys it, to the point where the house is trembling and everything is, bumping. And for me, it's really overstimulating, and I really don't enjoy it. Or, for example, he is, a car guy. He loves his cars, and he likes speeding up, and revving up the engine, and he feels excited and happy. But I shut down, and I'm like, please stop. Can you please not? I don't like it. I don't like these acute sensations. It might seem really annoying to be so sensitive to things other people don't notice, but there are actually pros to being an HSP. Your trait really does make you special. There are many fruits growing from the trait of sensitivity. Your mind works differently. Please remember that what follows is on the average. Nobody has all these traits, but compared to non-HSPs, most of us are better at spotting errors and avoiding making errors, highly conscientious, able to concentrate deeply, but we do best without distractions. Especially good at tasks requiring vigilance, accuracy, speed, and the detection of minor differences, able to process material to deeper levels of what psychologists call semantic memory, often thinking about our own thinking, oh yes, able to learn without being aware we have learned, deeply affected by other people's moods and emotions. Our bodies are different too. Most of us have nervous systems that make us specialists in fine motor movements, good at holding still, morning people. Here there are many exceptions. More affected by stimulants like caffeine unless we are very used to them, more right-brained, less linear, more creative in a synthesizing way, more sensitive to things in the air. Yes, that means more hay fever and skin rashes. Overall, again, our nervous systems seem designed to react to subtle experiences, which also makes us slower to recover when we must react to intense stimuli. But HSPs are not in a more aroused state all the time. We are not chronically aroused in day-to-day life or when asleep. We are just more aroused by new or prolonged stimulation. Being an HSP is not the same as being neurotic, that is, constantly anxious for no apparent reason. Now, where did this trait come from? In most cases, sensitivity is inherited. The evidence for this is strong, mainly from studies of identical twins who were raised apart but grew up behaving similarly. So sorry about the radiator noises. I can also testify that my mom has a lot of very similar traits that I think I inherited from her. For example, growing up, I would watch TV with my dad, and mom would often complain that those action movies are too loud and too violent, When I was younger, I did enjoy those movies, but I think it was mostly because I wanted to hang out with my dad and do something cool. But as I got older, I started avoiding loud movies, and I actually never really enjoyed nightclubs with loud music and restaurants where you have to yell over the music. They are just too much for me. At the same time, the environment can make some changes to your trait too. Living in a noisy or crowded environment, growing up in a large family, or being made to be more physically active may sometimes reduce sensitivity, just as sensitive animals that are handled a great deal will sometimes lose some of their natural caution, at least with certain people or in specific situations. That the underlying trait is entirely gone, however, seems unlikely. Elaine suggests that we learn to perceive the sensitivity trait as neutral. We should learn to, not see it as good or bad, just something that is there. It's not a bug, it's a feature, like the software developers say. However, unfortunately, in some cultures, this trait can be viewed as a disadvantage. I'm going to read a passage from the book. What is the ideal in our culture? Movies, advertisements, the design of public spaces all tell us we should be as tough as the Terminator, as stoic as Clint Eastwood, as outgoing as Goldie Hawn. We should be pleasantly stimulated by bright lights, noise, a gang of cheerful fellows hanging out in a bar. If we are feeling overwhelmed and sensitive, we can always take a painkiller. If you remember only one thing from this book, it should be the following research study. Xin-Yin Chen and Kenneth Rubin of the University of Waterloo in Ontario, Canada, and Ye-Rong Sun of Shanghai Teachers University compared 480 school children in Shanghai to 296 in Canada to see what traits made children most popular. In China, shy and sensitive children were among those most chosen by others to be friends or playmates. In Mandarin, the word for shy or quiet means good or well-behaved. Sensitive can be translated as having understanding, a term of praise. In Canada, shy and sensitive children were among the least chosen. Chances are this is the kind of attitude you faced growing up. Think about the impact on you of not being the ideal for your culture. It has to affect you, not only how others have treated you, but how you have come to treat yourself. However, Elaine stresses the importance of having different personality types in society, as she calls them royal advisors and warrior kings. Someone was made to conquer and fight, while others are destined to be thinkers, advisors, spiritual and moral leaders of society. So despite aggressive, outgoing and extroverted traits being praised more, being thoughtful and sensitive also has benefits for society. Chapter 2 is called Digging Deeper, Understanding Your Trait for All That It Is. In this chapter, Elaine shares different psychological and biological research proving that hypersensitivity is a real trait. It can be measured by levels of hormones in a person's bodily fluids, such as saliva, for example. She also gives examples of twins growing together where one twin is, so to say, usual and the other one is highly sensitive. So when they experience the same things, one twin is delighted by them, such things as waves, merry-go-rounds, live bands, and the other twin is intimidated by them. Chapter 3 is called General Health and Lifestyle for HSPs, and in this chapter the author compares highly sensitive people's body to being an infant. You know how babies and infants require attention and specific care? If you have children, you'll understand right away what she means. How when they didn't take a nap on time, the whole family can be in trouble, or if they were overstimulated at a long play date, or if they're hungry, they get cranky, and so on. Why the infant/body self? Think of what the infant and the body have in common. First, both are wonderfully content and cooperative when they are not overstimulated, worn out, and hungry. Second, when babies and sensitive bodies really are exhausted, both are largely helpless to correct things on their own. The baby you relied on a caretaker to set limits and satisfy your simple basic needs, and your body relies on you to do it now. Both also cannot use words to explain their troubles. They can only give louder and louder signals for help or develop a symptom so serious it cannot be ignored. The wise caretaker knows that much woe is avoided by responding to the infant/body at the first sign of distress. Now, talking about babies, we are about to talk about caretakers and attachment styles. You know how there are different kinds of parents. Helicopter parents who overly control their children in everything they do, and on the contrary, parents who are mostly absent, literally or metaphorically, not caring much, about what's going on to their children. Ideally, the attachment should be something in between, when a parent is present, holding the child, supporting them, but not overly restricting them. But the reality is that it's very rare, because nobody is perfect in this imperfect world. The point of all this is that how others took care of you as an infant/body has very much shaped how you take care of your infant/body now. Their attitude toward your sensitivity has shaped your attitude toward it. Think about it. Who else could have taught as deep a lesson? Their care for you and their attitude toward your body directly affects your health, happiness, longevity, and contributions to the world. Just as there are two kinds of problem caretakers, underprotective and overprotective, there are two general ways that HSPs fail to care properly for their bodies. You may push yourself out too much, overstimulate yourself with too much work, risk-taking or exploring, or you may keep yourself in too much, overprotecting yourself when you really long to be out there in the world like others. By too much, I mean more than you would really like, more than feels good, more than your body can handle. Of course, the secret of happiness is always in balance, not being out too much and not being in too much. I'll read an example from the book. Here is the wise advice of one HSP I interviewed. You need to learn all about this sensitivity. It will be an obstacle or an excuse only if you allow it to be. For myself, when I am too withdrawn, I would like to stay home for the rest of my life. I am like that too. But it is self-destructive. So I go out to meet the rest of the world, then come back to incorporate them. Creative people need time without people, but they can't go too long. When you retreat, you lose your sense of reality, your adaptability. Getting older can also take you out of touch with reality, cause you to lose your flexibility. You need to stay out there more as you age. But as you age, grace develops too. Your basic traits become stronger, especially if you develop all of yourself, not just your sensitivity. Be in tune with your body. It is a great gift you can use, this sensitivity to your body. It can guide you, and your opening to it will make it better. Of course, sensitive people want to shut the doors to the world and to their bodies. They become fearful. You can't do that. Self-expression is the better way. So start a YouTube channel. Just kidding. But, there is a point there. There is definitely a point. Well, I can definitely relate to, what I have just read. So most of my life, I always felt like I am a true introvert, and I don't really like being with a lot of people. I always thought, I'm kind of shy. I kind of like to be by myself. Interactions used to really, really scare me. It got better with age, actually. And surprisingly, it got better after COVID, because after we were, stuck in the pandemic, at first I was working from home. Everything was remote. I was working from home, for the corporation still. And you might think, what a paradise for an introvert to be working from home, right? But surprisingly, I was really anxious. It was a very scary time for me, and it actually made me realize that I need people. I liked going to the office, not necessarily, participating in all the small talk, but I liked being among people. I want to be able to go to a Starbucks, be among people again, not necessarily talking to all of them, but just kind of being together. I also go to the gym. I've been working out for more than 10 years, and I don't like when people talk to me at the gym. I don't want to make friends or anything like that. But I noticed that I actually like to be with people. I don't like being completely alone. Next comes a very interesting subchapter about rest. Infants need a lot of rest, don't they? So do highly sensitive bodies. We need all kinds of rest. First, we need sleep. If you have trouble sleeping, make this your first priority. Research on chronic sleep loss has found that when people are allowed to sleep as much as they need, it can take 2 weeks for them to reach the point where they show no signs of sleep deprivation. If you are showing signs of sleep debt, you need to plan some vacation time periodically that allows you to do nothing but sleep as much as you want. You will be surprised by how much that will be. HSPs do worse than others working night shifts or mixed shifts, and they recover more slowly from jet lag. True. Sorry, but it goes with the territory. Better not to plan, or at least not to plan to enjoy brief trips across many time zones. Boy, do I have a story about brief trips across time zones. So my husband is this fun guy who really likes active rest. We say that in Russian, which means, you don't like to basically lie down on the beach. You like to run around, see the sights and everything. Ever since we got married, our first trip, the honeymoon to the sea, we were arguing because I was like, I want to be on the beach all day long and do nothing. And he was like, no, I want to explore those, hills over there. I want to walk for an hour, and so on and so forth. And a few years ago, we went to London. And because the flight was going through Iceland and the tickets were so cheap, he was like, we should stop, in Iceland and for a day and see everything. And then we also decided to fly up to Scotland, for a day from London. It seems so fun, right? But I remember very well when I was at a hotel in Iceland and it was winter. And I think it got dark at like 1 p.m., I believe. And I was waking up and I was like, I have no idea where I am. I have no idea what time it is. I was like, where the heck am I? Changing planes and, that trip to Scotland. Of course, it was amazing. I do want to travel more. I do want to see more places. But doing things like that, like quickly changing planes, is stressful for me. Last year it happened again, so my husband was like, we should go down south. We live in the Boston area and we only travel in New England. We always go to Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Connecticut, but never, America is such a giant country. So last year we were like, we should go. We wanted to go to a BMW plant or something like that in North Carolina, but we ended up scheduling something. We went down to Florida, but we first flew down to Washington, D.C. because we wanted to see, our capital city and the White House and everything. And then we traveled down to Georgia because we wanted to see how it goes, how it is there, because it's already different. Washington, D.C., I actually really liked the city, but it's still very similar, to New England in a lot of ways. It's a little bit warmer there, but a lot of the things is very similar, like similar plants, similar climate. Georgia is already different, it's hotter, so the plants are different. And I always go to a botanical garden wherever I travel. And then we flew down to Florida. Again, the flights were very cheap. Like, we didn't have luggage, we traveled light, we had a backpack each, the three of us. And by the time, and then, we stayed in Florida for like 2 days. And then we flew to New York City, spent a day there, and came back to Boston. And, by the time we were in Florida, I was like, I hate it so much. It's like, I feel bad because I do want to see all the different places and sites and cities, but it's exhausting, changing planes like this, changing, hotels, like every new day you're in a new place. Sometimes in one day you've been to 2 different states. That's crazy. There was another trip, actually. I remember we went to, I think, Portugal, and we changed planes in Germany because Lenny, my husband, wanted to see the BMW headquarters. It was in Munich, I believe. I think it's in Munich. And we fell asleep in an Olympic park, my daughter and I, on the grass in the park because we were so exhausted by the jet lag. He's like, we'll be fine. My husband's like, we'll be completely fine, it's okay, who needs sleep, right? So we still laugh to this day. It's our family story, like we were sleeping on the grass, not because we came to sleep in the park, but we were just so tired. And we arrived at the airport and we took public transport to that BMW headquarters, and then we had to wait for something. And at the time I was hating him so much and thinking to myself, why did I agree to this? That was still before I realized I am highly sensitive to all these things. But now all the facts come together as puzzle pieces. I'm like, yes, I understand now why it was so difficult for me. Next, let's talk a little about insomnia. This next phrase is a little funny. She says, If insomnia is a problem, you can find plenty of advice on that in other sources. There are even centers for treating it, but here are some points that may apply especially to HSPs. First, respect your natural rhythms and retire when you first become sleepy. For a morning person, that means going to bed early in the evening. For a night person, the ones with the more difficult problem, it means sleeping late as often as possible. Sleep researchers tend to advise people to associate their bed only with sleeping and to get up if they cannot sleep. But I find HSPs sometimes do better if they promise themselves to stay in bed for 9 hours with their eyes closed without worrying if they are actually sleeping. Since 80% of sensory stimulation comes in through the eyes, just resting with your eyes closed gives you quite a break. The problem with staying in bed while awake, however, is that some people begin to worry or otherwise over-arouse themselves with their thoughts or imaginings. If this happens, it might be better to read or get up and think through the issue in your mind, write down your ideas or solutions, then go back to bed. Sleep problems are one of those many areas where we each are unique and must find what works for us. So, sleep issues are my middle name basically. I have gone through a lot of different things. I have had sleep problems since I was like 16. Sometimes I can not sleep for an entire night, and I used to freak out about it so much, because it's scary, like you're supposed to be sleeping but you are not. And actually later on, a few years ago, I realized that it's very important not to, beat yourself up about it. Like, what if, I'm insomniac, I can't sleep for one night? That's okay, I'll probably sleep very well the next night. And actually a couple of videos on my channel were edited at night when I couldn't sleep. And once I even painted a plein air painting. We live next to a pond, and because I couldn't sleep, I just went out and painted in watercolor. Well, be careful, please. I'm not, urging you to walk at night, but I'm just saying, if you can't sleep for some reason, and, I'm not saying it's a new problem. Of course, you need to look into this and understand why you're not sleeping. But if you, I already know that happens to me from time to time. Sometimes I lose sleep, it will get back, it will get better. So I think the important thing is not to freak out about it too much. Just kind of, okay, so tonight, I'm not sleeping. Tomorrow I'll have a very good night of sleep. We need other kinds of rest too, however. HSPs tend to be very conscientious and perfectionistic. Tell me about it. We cannot play until all the details of our work are done. The details are like little needles of arousal poking us, but that can make it difficult to relax and have some fun. The infant/body wants play, and play creates endorphins and all the other good changes that undo stress. If you are depressed, overly emotional in other ways, not sleeping, or showing other signs of being out of balance, force yourself to plan more play. But what is fun? Be careful not to let the non-HSPs in your world define that for you. For many HSPs, fun is reading a good book, or gardening a little bit at their own pace, or a quiet meal at home prepared and eaten slowly. In particular, squeezing in a dozen activities by noon may not be your idea of fun at all. Or it may be okay in the morning but not by afternoon. So always plan a way to bail out. If you are with someone, be sure to warn them ahead of time so that they will not feel insulted or hurt when you drop out. Yes, again, another example about my husband. He is the guy who can, run 15 errands in a row and he'll be completely fine. And he always makes fun of me. He's like, you won't leave the house until you have had your tea very slowly, you have kissed the cat, you have eaten your cookie, and, put on your makeup. I'm like, what's wrong with that? And my daughter is actually the same. Like, we need our comfort. We need to take things slowly. I can't, do things like that. Of course I can, and sometimes life forces you to, but then I burn out so easily after that. Besides sleep and recreation, HSPs also need plenty of downtime just for unwinding and thinking over the day. Sometimes we can do this while performing our daily tasks, driving, washing dishes, gardening, but if you have found ways to eliminate some of those tasks, you still need that downtime. Take it. Yet another form of rest, perhaps the most essential, is transcendence. rising above it all, usually in the form of meditation, contemplation, or prayer. At least some of your transcendent time should be aimed at taking you out of all ordinary thinking into pure consciousness, pure being, pure unity, or oneness with God. Even if your transcendence falls short of this, when you return, you will have a bigger, fresher perspective on your life. So for me, the state of transcendence, is walking. I take long walks. Sometimes they turn into hikes depending on where I walk. My normal walk lasts about an hour. Sometimes I walk for 2 hours, to relieve anxiety and, just to clear my mind out. Sleep takes you out of your narrow state of mind too, of course, but the brain is in a different state when asleep. Indeed, it is in a different state for each type of activity: sleep, play, meditation, prayer, yoga, so a mixture is good. But do include some meditation that has the goal of experiencing pure consciousness and involves no physical activity and no concentration or effort. This state is undoubtedly the one that provides the most deep rest while the mind is still alert. So there's been a lot of data on, meditation being really great for your mental health. For sure, it's a proven fact already. And, I try to meditate as well. I'm not really a big fan of it, but I am forcing myself to. And, there are different ways to meditate too. I used to have a subscription for the Calm app, and there was a guy there whose meditations I really, really liked. I noticed I like male voices better than female voices for some reason. And I found some great videos on YouTube, to meditate too. But I'm not really, a good expert on that. So I'm not going to give you a lot of advice. But, I know meditation is helpful. And at the times when I'm truly desperate and, when I'm really, anxious, I do turn to meditation sometimes. Of course, you also want to pay attention to what you eat and to get enough exercise. I know all this boring stuff, but it really does work. My daughter gets very annoyed when she's like, I can't sleep. I say, you need to use your phone less, and she gets so annoyed by that. But truth is, these things work. A healthy diet, exercise, fresh air, and screen time limiting. So these things work. That is a very individual matter, talking about exercise. And there are plenty of other books to advise you on that. I like how she kind of like, I'm not going to talk about insomnia. I'm not going to talk about exercise, right? Do learn about the foods that tend to calm the body or take the edge off, helping you to sleep. And get enough of the vitamins and minerals, for example, magnesium, that affect stress and overarousal. If you are used to caffeine, it probably does nothing special to arouse you unless you drink a little more than usual. It is a powerful drug for HSPs, however. Be careful about using it just now and then, thinking it will improve your performance the way it does for those around you. For example, if you are a morning person and do not usually drink caffeine and then drink it one morning before an important exam or interview, it could actually make you perform worse by over-arousing you. I can totally agree with that, and I try not to drink too much coffee. I usually have 1 cup a day, maximum 2. And, on a night, like on a sleepless night, if I didn't have sleep at all, or if I slept very poorly on that night, I actually try to avoid drinking coffee because I know it will make me crazy. Strategies for overarousal. A good caretaker develops many strategies for soothing his or her infant. Some are more psychological, some more physical. Either approach will change the other. Choose according to your intuition. Any approach requires taking action, getting up, going to the infant, doing something. Here are some other psychological methods useful in handling overarousal. Reframe the situation. Repeat a phrase, prayer, or mantra that, through daily practice, you have come to associate with deep inner calm. Witness your overarousal. Love the situation. Love your overarousal. So basically, I'll explain it briefly. Instead of freaking out, a similar advice is given when people handle panic attacks. Don't stress about panicking, don't stress about being overaroused. Just basically be accepting, like it says, love the situation. So observe it and be like, oh, I am actually overaroused right now. And instead of being so scared, you just kind of, live through that. It's not going to kill me. I'm overaroused, but it's not the end of the world. I've been here before. It happened before. It says here, loving the situation sounds pretty flippant, but it's important. An expanded, loving mind, one that is open to the whole universe, is the opposite of a tightly constricted, overaroused mind. And if you cannot love the situation, it is vitally important and even more essential that you love yourself in your state of not being able to love the situation. Finally, do not forget the power of music to change your mood. Why do you think armies have bands? But beware that most HSPs are strongly affected by music, so the right choice is essential. When you are already aroused, you do not want to stir yourself up more with emotional pieces or something associated with important memories. Sobbing violins are out at such times. And of course, since any music increases stimulation, use it only when it seems to soothe you. Its purpose is to distract you. Sometimes you need to be distracted. At other times, you need to attend carefully. I have a playlist that's called Relax or something like that. I listen to a lot of electronic dance music, not because I'm a dancer, but it's good to work out to and good to work to when you need this like pumping rhythm. But I have a playlist called Relax when it's late at night and I have to still be working, for example, at 9 p.m. I don't like doing it that way, but sometimes you have to, keep focused. Or sometimes if I'm walking outside, I'm usually thinking. But if I don't want to think, like I'm already, so overaroused by overthinking, I just put on some relaxing music. But since we are dealing with the body, it can be an equally good idea to try a physical approach. Here's a list of some purely physical strategies. Get out of the situation. Close your eyes to shut out some of the stimulation. Take frequent breaks. Go out of doors. Use water to take the stress away. Take a walk. Calm your breathing. Adjust your posture to be more relaxed and confident. Move. Smile softly. It's amazing how often we forget to take action simply to get out of a situation, or take a break, or take the situation, task, discussion, argument out of doors. Many HSPs find nature deeply soothing. Water helps in many ways. When over-aroused, keep drinking it, a big glass of it once an hour. Walk beside some water, look at it, listen to it, get into some if you can for a bath or a swim. Hot tubs and hot springs are popular for good reasons. I like taking a shower, when I need to relax too. Or touch the water if you can somewhere, if it's a clear lake that you can touch, why not? Walking is also one of those basic comforts. The familiar rhythm is soothing, so is the rhythm of slow breathing, especially from your stomach. Exhale slowly with a little extra effort, as if blowing out a candle. You will automatically inhale from your stomach, or merely attend to your breathing. This old friend will settle you down. The next curious subchapter is called The Containers in Your Life, and I'm going to read something. If you think about it, your life is filled with safe containers or harbors. Some are concrete, your home, car, office, neighborhood, a cottage or a cabin, a certain valley or hilltop, a forest or a bit of shoreline, certain clothing or certain beloved public places such as a church or a library. Some of the most important containers are the precious people in your life: spouse, parent, child, brother, sister, grandparent, close friend, spiritual guide, or therapist. Then there are the even less tangible containers: your work, memories of good times, certain people you cannot be with anymore but who live on in your memory, your deepest beliefs and philosophy of life, inner worlds of prayer or meditation. The physical containers may seem the most reliable and valuable, especially to the infant/body self. It is the intangible ones, however, that are really the most reliable. There are so many accounts of people who maintain their sanity by retreating into such containers while under extreme stress or danger. Whatever happened, nothing and no one could take away from their private love, faith, creative thinking, mental practice, or spiritual exercise. Part of maturing into wisdom is transferring more and more of your sense of security from the tangible to the intangible containers. And a word on boundaries, a very important topic. Boundaries are obviously an idea closely related to containers. Boundaries should be flexible, letting in what you want and keeping out what you don't want. You want to avoid shutting everyone out all the time indiscriminately, and you want to control any urges to merge with others. It would be nice, but it just doesn't work for long. You lose all of your autonomy. Many HSPs tell me that a major problem for them is poor boundaries, getting involved in situations that are not really their business or their problem, letting too many people distress them, saying more than they wanted, getting mired in other people's messes, becoming too intimate too fast or with the wrong people. There is one essential rule here: boundaries take practice. Make good boundaries your goal. They are your right, your responsibility, your greatest source of dignity. But do not become too distressed when you slip up. Just notice how much better you are getting at it. So boundaries is a big and very important topic, and I learned to set my boundaries with my first therapist, with whom we worked for 9 months. And also before I actually had my therapist, I started watching a lot of videos on YouTube about psychology, this popular psychology, and then it kind of blew up on the Russian internet, and some psychologists became celebrities basically. But nevertheless, working on boundaries is very important. What does it mean, boundaries? It means knowing where you are, what you can do and what you cannot do, what is acceptable and what is unacceptable. And setting boundaries is not easy, and learning to set them is very hard, especially if all your life you have been this people pleaser, the person who always wants to be good, who always wants to look like the good person. People who have strict parents very often have poor boundaries, because parents basically dictate them what they should be doing. And while such people are they're very convenient for society, convenient in an office where they are used as labor, they can be taken advantage of in a relationship, they themselves suffer because they shut down their needs and they cannot set their boundaries, which means they cannot say no to things, right? They involve with some other people's problems too much. So, learning to set boundaries takes time and takes practice, like it said here in italics. And at first, you might even overdo a little bit, and it might scare people, if you never ever said no before, and now you're like, no, I'm not actually coming, to the family gathering. Like, I have other plans. It'll be like, oh, what? Or if you always ran errands for someone and now suddenly you are refusing to. People will be shocked and confused. I had an episode with my mom when I started working, with a psychologist, and she told me, you need to voice your feelings. You need to talk about things that, you disagree with. It is very scary at first. So I sent my mom a photo of myself where I was like standing on a porch, leaning on a rail. And my mom is like, can I congratulate you? Are you pregnant? I was not pregnant. It was like, I wasn't even overweight, it was just like a fold on my dress. And this whole topic of like people commenting on women's bodies just stresses me out so much. Like, I hate it. Like, don't talk about pregnancy, don't talk about my body. And I texted my mom like, Mom, I don't like it when you comment on my body. I'm not pregnant. It's very personal. When I'm pregnant, I will tell you. And my mom was like severely offended, because because I just saw a reel yesterday. It was like a skit. Your mom is offended because she hurt your feelings? Yep, exactly. So my mom didn't talk to me for like a month, because apparently, she wasn't used to rejection, to this wall of boundaries. And then she sent me like an email, like 3 pages of like how I'm grateful I am and things like that, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? It was very difficult for me to handle this. It's also a process of emotional separation from your mom, which I still love her greatly, but I'm a separate grown-up person, and I don't want anybody commenting on my body. I had a student who also asked me once, like, if I was pregnant, but my body is just built that way. I always have a little belly. Even when I was skinny, I still had that belly. And it's normal, women have bellies. So we did make up with my mom, in a month. And there was also a learning experience, even if you stop talking with your family for a little bit, you are still family. You will make up. People argue sometimes. People, oh my God, I forgot the English word. Like you have a fight, basically. You have an argument. Is it fall out? Like fall apart, fall out. Forgot the word. So it's not the end of the world. And it's very important to know that you need to keep reinforcing your boundaries softly, but firmly at the same time. Just keep repeating the same things and keep explaining that, Mom, I still love you dearly, but I still don't like it when you comment on my body, and things like that. Even with my own husband, again, the closest person ever to me. Like I said, he likes to run errands quickly and he likes things done quickly, and it was normal for him to say, like, can you go to, Lowe's before work at like 7 a.m. and buy 2 sacks of concrete for me? And I was like, no, I can't. I'm sorry. It's out of my way. And, there's no way I'm going, in my nice work outfit to a home improvement store to buy concrete. It's heavy, for God's sake. But at that time, when I was learning to say, no, I can't, I'm sorry, I can't do this for you. I had this fear inside me, you have this fear, like you say no to a person and they reject you forever. So my therapist was like, what will happen if you say no to your husband? And I'm like, I don't know. She's like, what will happen? And I can't answer this question because I'm like, well, we're definitely not going to get divorced, right? But it's like, nobody will die if you say no to a person. You both will be fine. It'll be okay. Chapter 4 is about reframing your childhood and adolescence. This chapter analyzes different childhood experiences from lives of highly sensitive people. The author points out there is a difference in gender here, for example. For girls, being shy and sensitive is viewed more positively, whereas for boys, it is usually viewed as a negative trait. In this chapter, Elaine also talks about parenting and attachment styles and how growing up we can learn to reframe different experiences we had. I don't really want to stop too long on this chapter. It has a lot of psychological content and things that ideally should be worked out in therapy, and it takes months and years, and nobody is ever completely done with therapy, right? You're still developing and growing. The book points out that many HSPs had a troubled childhood, but not necessarily. Sometimes the parents and teachers and peers were supportive, but for a sensitive child, life is harder anyway. A couple words on therapy. I already mentioned it a little bit, but I used to have a therapist. We worked together for 9 months weekly, and then we parted ways. I also had a few consultations with other therapists after that over the years. But the reason that I took a long break from therapy was that I actually learned to work out problems by myself for the most part. If you would like a separate video about it, I can make it. Please let me know in the comments. In a nutshell, I journal a lot. I write a diary and analyze my writing, or also record audio files where I talk and I record it. And my goal is definitely not to impress anybody or to record a pretty audio. I just spill it all out. It's just faster than writing. You can definitely write as well, and I think you should. It's a helpful tool in self-reflection. But you can also, talk and record what you are saying, and then, when you are replaying the audio, you can hear it as a different person, and you're like, wow, I really think that? Did I really just say, like, I hate myself? But it's so strange to hear it, right? So self-therapy is great too, but I'd say if you have deep internal issues, therapy can be indispensable. I'm very grateful to my first therapist with whom we worked out, different important problems. And actually, as I briefly mentioned, I am back to therapy now. I have a brand new therapist. We only had one session. I tried a couple other ones before that, but I have this brand new women, and I turned to therapy because I felt stuck. I felt like my recordings were not helping me anymore, and I was like spinning the same ideas. The anxiety was really bad, and so I did turn to therapy again. Chapter 5 is dedicated to social relationships. It talks about how very often HSPs are labeled shy, and this word has a lot of negative connotations, even though it shouldn't. 75% of people in the United States are socially outgoing, and not having these characteristics is often viewed as negative. What those people don't understand is sometimes the so-called shy person is choosing to be alone and is not avoiding communication because they fear rejection. Of course, when someone doesn't regularly mingle with a lot of people, they usually do get a little less skilled at small talk, for example. But that's natural. If you don't practice a skill, you don't have it. Ellen suggests that in any conversation, no matter how shy you are, you need to meet the minimum etiquette requirements. So dead silence is uncomfortable for both parties. Just learning to manage a conversation or to get by, as she says, is enough. I'm going to read again a little bit. How to think about your social discomfort. Social discomfort, the term I prefer to shy, is almost always due to overarousal, which makes you act, speak, or appear not very socially skilled. Or it is the dread that you will become overaroused. You dread doing something awkward, not being able to think of what to say. But the dread itself is usually enough now to create the overarousal once in the situation. Remember, discomfort is temporary and it gives you choices. Suppose you are uncomfortably cold. You can tolerate it. You can find a more congenial environment. You can create some heat, build a fire, turn up the thermostat, or ask those in charge to do it. You can put on a coat. The one thing you should not do is blame yourself for being inherently more susceptible to a cold environment. The same is true of a temporary social discomfort due to overarousal. You can put up with it, leave the situation, change the social atmosphere, or ask others to, or do something else to make you more comfortable, like put on your persona. I'll discuss this later. In all cases, you are consciously ridding yourself of the discomfort. So forget the idea that you are inherently uncomfortable in social situations. 5 ways to handle overarousal in social situations. 1. Remember that overarousal is not necessarily fear. 2. Find other HSPs to talk to, one-on-one. 3. Use your arousal reducing skills. Remember, like we said, water, breathing exercises, and other things. Also the take 5 exercise, right? When you have to name five things that you can smell now, 5 things that you can touch, 5 things you can see, 5 things you can hear, and something else. 4. Develop a good persona and consciously use it. You know how Beyonce says her alter ego is Sasha Fierce, and Beyonce herself is actually shy and introverted, but Sasha Fierce is the stage persona that she uses to be a superstar. Number 5, explain your trait to others. Never underestimate the power of simply acknowledging to yourself that you are overaroused, possibly by something having nothing to do with the people you are with. If you are judged for that, it is not the real you, but the one temporarily flustered by overarousal. If and when they know the calm you, the you who is subtly aware, they will be favorably impressed. You know that it's true because you have close friends who admire you. I saw a very cool artwork the other day on Instagram. It was like, hold on partner, I'm overstimulated. It's t-shirts with a frog, and there are a lot of variations. I'll add some images here. I like the artwork. I was thinking of getting one of those t-shirts, and I was like, it would be really cool to film this video in this t-shirt, but I ended up not doing it. So the book also has more info on introverted HSPs who make about 75%, and also the extroverted type. So there are extroverted HSPs as well. There is also more advice on handling social interactions. There is a subchapter called Basic Social Advice for HSPs that includes such topics as when you just have to chit-chat. And I really like the advice here. You can decide whether you want to talk or listen when you have to make small talk. Very often people are happy to talk and just need a listener. And sensitive people are usually great listeners. So some other topics are remembering names, having to make a request, and selling. And I'm going to read this one because I think as designers we often have to sell something. There's also advice on being in a small group, public speaking, or performing. So selling. Frankly, it's not a usual HSP career, but even if you do not sell a commercial product, there are many times in life when we want to sell an idea, ourselves for a job, or maybe our creative work. And what if you believe something could truly help a person or the world at large? In its gentlest form, yours probably, selling is simply sharing with others what you know about something. Remember, I mentioned it in one of my previous videos that selling is just sharing information, right? Once they understand what you think is its value, you can let them make up their own mind. When money is to be exchanged, HSPs often feel guilty that they're taking so much or anything at all. And if we feel flawed, what am I really worth anyway? Usually we cannot and should not give ourselves or our products away. We need money to continue to make available what we are offering. People understand that, just as you do when you purchase something. Making a complaint, this can be difficult for an HSP even if it's legitimate, but it is worth practicing. The assertiveness is empowering for those who often feel put down just for being who they are. Too young, too old, too fat, too dark-skinned, too sensitive, etc. I think this relates again to boundaries. Setting your boundaries. If you are, offended by something in customer service, you need to speak up. You were brought the wrong dish or something like that. You need to speak up. It's not the end of the world. You must be ready, however, for the other's response. Remember I mentioned that when you start expressing yourself yourself and setting your boundaries. People are usually not ready for that. Anger is the most arousing emotion for good reasons. It is meant to mobilize us to fight. It is arousing whether it is yours, theirs, or even that of someone you're just observing from a distance. So my first therapist also taught me to deal with anger, because when people are shy, they often suppress their anger and are afraid to express it. But anger, like all other emotions, is completely legitimate. There are situations when you do feel anger and it's normal. And anger also has a lot of energy. Sometimes when I'm stuck with something, I try to make myself angry and be like, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna, like with this video, I'm like, nothing's gonna stop me from filming the video today, not the repair work or anything. So anger, when you are sad and depressed, anger often helps you, get out of it, because you're like, I'm gonna show you. And talking about social situations, I already mentioned that, I do consider myself more of an introvert, but it's different. Small talk can be annoying when you are like a deep, thoughtful person, but small talk releases tension. It just basically shows people, I'm not a psycho, and we can talk about the weather a little bit. And it's also very important to mingle with the right people. Like I mentioned in one of my previous videos, working at a botanical garden, I love meeting people with the same values as me. It's so much fun, it was very hard for me, working at the corporate world, where like nobody wanted to talk about plants, nobody wanted to talk about painting. People want to talk about TV shows they watch, restaurants they go to drink at. And nothing wrong with that, but I have different interests and values, so finding your right people is very important. Being in an interest group, being with like-minded people. Chapter 6 is perhaps the most interesting, and it's called Thriving at Work. I personally had a lot of trouble trying to be like everybody else and work a 9-to-5 schedule, and it took me a while to realize that I'm a little bit different and my body and psyche have different needs. Now that I have realized I'm a highly sensitive person and I'm freelancing from home, my life is much better and easier. Not to say I don't feel guilty or that I'm making lots of money. Again, I'm not, so there are always pros and cons to everything. But keeping this balance of work life and a minimally stressful environment is crucial for me. I can be more creative, I can be myself, I can be more open, I can make these videos. So this chapter talks a lot about following your calling or following your bliss or doing what you like, essentially. But the author points out that earning an income is very important still, and it is a big mistake to support HSPs financially at 100%. If an HSP is not forced to be practical, he will lose all touch with the rest of the world. She will become an empty windbag no one listens to. But how can one make money and still follow a calling? One way is to seek the point where the path directed by our greatest bliss crosses that directed by the world's greatest need. That is, what is it willing to pay for? At this intersection, you will earn money for doing what you love. Actually, the relation of a person's vocation to his or her paying job can be quite varied and will change over a lifetime. We discussed it in the scanner personality video as well. Sometimes your job is just the way to make money. The vocation is pursued in your spare time. A fine example is Einstein's developing the theory of relativity while he was a clerk in a patent office, happy to have mindless work so he could be free to think about what mattered to him. At other times, we can find or create a job that fulfills our vocation, and the pay will be at least adequate. There may be many possible jobs that do that, or the job that will serve the purpose will change as experience grows and the vocation deepens. Vocation and the liberated HSP. Individuation is, above all, about being able to hear your inner voice or voices through all the inner and outer noise. Some of us get caught up in demands from others. These may be real responsibilities or maybe the common ideas of what makes for success: money, prestige, security. Then there are the pressures others can bring to bear on us because we are so unwilling to displease anyone. Eventually, many, if not most, HSPs are probably forced into what I call liberation. even if it doesn't happen until the second half of life. They tune in to the inner question and the inner voices rather than the questions others are asking them to answer. Being so eager to please, we're not easy to liberate. We are too aware of what others need. Yet our intuition also picks up on the inner question that must be answered. These two strong, conflicting currents may buffet us for years. Don't worry if your progress toward liberation is slow, for it's almost inevitable. I don't, however, want to develop some idealized image of a certain kind of HSP you must become. That is precisely not liberation. It is finding who you are, not what you think someone else wants you to become. Then we have a little chapter with examples of professions for highly sensitive people. What other HSPs are doing. Perhaps it would help to hear about the kinds of careers other HSPs have chosen. Of course, we bring our own flair to everything. In my telephone survey, I found, for example, that not many HSPs were salespersons, but one was of fine wines. Another sold real estate, saying that she used her intuition to match people with homes. One can imagine other HSPs shaping other jobs, almost any job, into something quiet, thoughtful, and conscientious, as when HSPs said they were teachers, hairstylists, mortgage brokers, pilots, flight attendants, professors, actors, early childhood educators, secretaries, doctors, nurses, insurance agents, professional athletes, cooks, and consultants. Other jobs seemed obviously suited to HSPs: cabinet maker, pet groomer, psychotherapist, minister, heavy equipment operator, noisy but no people, farmer, writer, artist, hello, lots of these, X-ray technician, meteorologist, tree trimmer, scientist, medical transcriber, editor, scholar in the humanities, accountant, and electrician. While some research has found that so-called shy people make less money, I certainly found plenty of HSPs in positions that sounded well paid: administrators, managers, bankers. Maybe other studies found that their so-called shy respondents were poorly paid because of a quirk in their data similar to mine. Twice as many HSPs as non-HSPs in my study called themselves homemaker, housewife, or full-time parent. Not all were women. If you counted them as not earning money, this would certainly lower their income average as a group. But of course, these people add income to their family by performing services which, if paid for, would be expensive. HSP homemakers find a good niche for themselves, provided they can ignore the culture's undervaluing of their work. In fact, the culture benefits greatly. Research on parenting, for example, continually finds the elusive quality of sensitivity to be the key in raising children well. Turning vocation into a job that pays. There are good books written just on the topic of turning what you love into what pays you a salary. Again, she is referring us somewhere, right? So as usual, I will focus on the aspects especially relevant to us. To make a paying job out of your true vocation often requires creating an entirely new service or profession, and that many mean starting your own business or creating a new job where you already work. That can seem daunting unless you remember to do it in the style of an HSP. First, throw out the image of everyone getting their work done through networking, knowing the right people, and the like. Some network is always needed, but there are ways that are effective enough and far more pleasant for HSPs. Letters, email, staying in touch with one person who stays in touch with many, taking out to lunch, and debriefing your extroverted colleague who goes to every conference. Second, you need to trust some of your advantages. With your intuition, you can study trends and perceive needs of markets before others. If you are excited about something, there is a good chance others are, or could be, once they heard your reasons. If your interest is not too unusual, it should fit into existing jobs. If it is very unusual, you are probably the leading expert, and someone somewhere will need you soon, especially once you share your vision. Years ago, an HSP with a passion for film and video took a job as a librarian and convinced her university that they should have a state-of-the-art film and video department. She saw that these media would be the cutting edge in education, especially continuing education of the public. Everyone sees that now, and her film and video library is the finest in the country. Self-employment, or being granted full autonomy within a larger organization, is a logical route for HSPs. You control the hours, the stimulation, organization, the kinds of people you will deal with, and there are no hassles with supervisors or co-workers. And unlike many small or the first-time entrepreneurs, you will probably be conscientious about research and planning before you take any risks. You will have to watch, however, for certain tendencies. If you are a typical HSP, you can be a worry-prone perfectionist. Oh my god, that is me. You may be the most hard-driving manager you have ever worked for. You also may have to overcome a certain lack of focus. If your creativity and intuition give you a million ideas, at some point early, you will have to let most of them go, and you will have to make all kinds of difficult decisions. Back to focusing, back to niching down, right? If you are an introvert also, you will have to make an extra effort to stay in touch with your public or market. You can always bring in an extrovert as a partner or assistant. Indeed, having partners or hiring others to absorb all sorts of excess stimulation is a good idea. But with them as a buffer between you and the world, your intuition will not receive direct input unless you plan for some real contact with those you serve. There is a special subchapter called Art as Vocation. Almost all HSPs have an artistic side they enjoy expressing, or they deeply appreciate some form of art, but some of you will pursue the arts as your vocation or even your livelihood. Almost all studies of the personalities of prominent artists insist that sensitivity is central. Unfortunately, that sensitivity is also linked with mental illness. The difficulty, I believe, is that normally we artists work alone, refining our craft and our subtle creative vision. But withdrawal of any kind increases sensitivity. That is part of why one withdraws. So we are extra sensitive when the time comes to show our work, perform it, explain it, sell it, read reviews of it, and accept rejection or acclaim. Then there's a sense of loss and confusion when a major work is done or a performance is over. Well, a lot of relatable points, right? I know it was a long passage, but I felt like I had to read it because it's just every sentence strikes a chord with me. I don't know about you guys. For me, I was like, oh, this is all about me. Further on, Elaine talks about serving others as a vocation, and she brings up an example of a man named Greg who was a school teacher but wanted to quit even though teaching was the only job he ever imagined himself doing. But at some point he was overwhelmed. It turned out that it was enough for him to cut down his hours and never work after 4 p.m. Sometimes it's possible to make arrangements to improve your job, and I also believe that if the situation is intolerable, we should look for ways to exit it or improve it. Very often it seems like nothing can be done, but it's not true. In short, you do not have to take the job that will create excessive stress and overarousal. Someone else will take it and flourish in it. You do not have to work long hours. Indeed, it may be your duty to work shorter ones. It may be best not to advertise it, but keeping yourself healthy and in your right range of arousal is the first condition for helping others. Think about it, it's very deep. I also wanted to talk a little about growth in the workplace if you do happen to work for an organization. Advancing in an organization. Research on shy people claims that they tend to be paid too little and to work below their competence level. I suspect this is true of many HSPs, although it's sometimes our choice. But if you want to be advancing and are not, or if layoffs are being considered and you don't want to be among them, you have to pay attention to strategy. Often HSPs don't like to play politics, but that in itself can make us subject to suspicion. We're so easily misperceived in all sorts of ways, especially if we spend less time with others in our workplace or do not share our thoughts with them. We can seem aloof, arrogant, odd. If we are also not pushy, we can seem uninterested or weak. Often these are utterly unwarranted projections, but you have to be watchful for these dynamics and plan to diffuse the projections. When it is appropriate, casually or formally, let others know your good feelings about them and the organization. You may think your positive feelings are obvious, but they may not be if you are low-key and the others are not very aware. Consider whether you also need to talk more openly about what you think you contribute, where you would like to see yourself eventually in the organization, and how long you are willing to wait to see it happen. Well, I decided to read this passage because I went through certain circumstances that really remind me of this. So first of all, when I just started working at my corporate job, my then manager called me out one day and she was like, you don't participate in conversations, you're listening to music, you're using your headphones. And I was like, I'm trying to focus on the job, I want to be working, because there are meetings around you going on, like you're sitting in the cubicle and people are walking the walls, looking at the artwork and discussing it. It's very distracting. Sometimes it's not even, about your department, but she didn't like it. Just like the book describes, like she thought I was absent, I was like not interested in the job, which was not true. And also, I was constantly being underappreciated by a different manager, and unnoticed by them. My husband always pushed me to talk about growth opportunities. At the time I was a contractor, so I was asking, what do I need to get hired? I was terrified, but I still did it a few times. It was kind of a feminist act for me as well. I read that women are very unlikely to talk about promotion in the workplace and ask for a raise, while men do it regularly with no shame. So while it wasn't successful and maybe even a little premature, I didn't have much experience, I was a baby designer, but I'm still kind of proud of myself that I pushed through and talked about it. I wasn't demanding anything. I was asking, what do I need to do to get promoted? I wanted to kind of pave the way maybe for the next designer, because contractors, I was told later on, weren't even supposed to mention a raise, like how do you get paid more? But I did, I was that cheeky young designer. One of my favorite mottos is do it scared. Have the fear, but do it anyways. I know it's not easy, especially for sensitive people, but I think it's important to remember that emotions, including fear, do not kill you. They are uncomfortable, but you can just tolerate them and be fine. And again, it's one of the things I was learning to do with my first therapist. Tolerate, bear the emotions, live with them, not run away from them. There are a few more chapters in the book. One talks about close relationships, having children, romantic relationships, sexuality, and so on. There is also a chapter on spirituality. I will not stop at those two. And another curious chapter about medics, medications, and HSPs. I want to read a little from this chapter. Ways your trait may affect your medical care. You may be more sensible to bodily signs and symptoms. If you do not lead a life suited to your trait, you can develop more stress-related and or psychosomatic illnesses. You are probably more sensitive to medications. You are probably more sensitive to pain. You will be more aroused, usually over-aroused, by medical environments, procedures, examinations, and treatments. In particular, in healthcare environments, your deep intuition probably cannot ignore the shadowy presence of suffering and death, the human condition. Given all of the above, and the fact that most mainstream medical professionals are not HSPs, your relationships with them is usually more problematic. The good news is that you can notice problems before they are major and be wonderfully aware of what helps. So I definitely, can relate to this passage as well. I always get nervous when I go to the doctors, and also I'm more sensitive to certain medications. For example, with my sleep problems, I use melatonin, which is a natural hormone. And when I first bought it, it says like use one dropper, an entire dropper, like 15 milliliters, maybe 30. I will look it up. And when I took that dose, I couldn't wake up the next morning. And now I take literally 2 or 3 drops of melatonin instead of that giant dose, because it knocks me out completely. There are also a few brief chapters with recommendations for teachers working with highly sensitive students, one for employers of highly sensitive people, and one for healthcare professionals for interacting with this group of people. I also wanted to share some things about being a highly sensitive person myself that were not discussed in the book. A big topic for me is energy levels. It influences my career, my productivity levels, my creativity, and my life in general. As I often joke, I only have a single pot of energy. I coined this term myself, which means that, if I had a very difficult workout at the gym today, I cannot, go shopping on the same day. Well, I had to turn on the light because it got dark outside, and I hope it works out. I'm almost done. I really want to finish this video today. So I was gonna say, oh, for example, I'm filming this video and it's a big endeavor for me, so I do not have any big plans for the same day because it's a lot of energy to use. A word on media noise, social media. Almost all of my notifications are muted because I get so stressed out. I don't want to get every single email, especially I wear a sports watch, and I disable notifications right away because I don't want them interrupting. I do check my email maybe about once an hour. I just go in there and see, if there's anything new. I don't want to get every single, I have my business email that I do get the emails immediately, which is very important. But all the, shipping notifications, I do not need to see them, in real time. Again, some are on, most are off actually. I know I mentioned my sleep problems, right? I do need a lot of solitude because this is how I recharge. And again, introverted, I read recently, doesn't mean shy. The psychologist who coined this term introverted, he just meant that, you get your resources from inside. It doesn't mean you're shy or you hate people. You just get recharged from the inside. Extroverts recharge from other people. Introverts recharge from their inner self. I have a small circle of friends, and in general I do not go to loud parties like I mentioned. I do have anxiety and I'm learning to deal with it, but again, you can live with anxiety. It doesn't kill you. It's very annoying, but it's still, life goes on. And also, most importantly probably, the way I work. I actually work independently. I don't take a lot of custom orders, and I actually get very stressed out when people reach out to me asking, about custom work. I do it, but I suffer so much along the way. The way I'm trying to set everything up in my business is moving towards a passive income. You might know that passive income, is a very elusive term, because in order for it to be passive, you need to put in a lot of work first. But I'm okay with that. I like uploading to different websites because again, there's minimum communication, or maybe none even. I can do it at my own pace. I can do it whenever I want. I can choose my design topics, because again, when you are working with a company, everything goes down to you, what you're supposed to work on. The deadlines are there. Now, I actually don't pitch as much. I know it's the holy grail of successful businessmen, to reach out to companies. I do limited pitching. If I really feel like my work aligns with a company, I will send them a pitch. But again, I really honestly, my philosophy in life, I really don't like to be bothered, okay? And I do feel bad about it, but again, I am what I am. This is me. It doesn't mean that I do not interact with people. I can put on a persona, you guys. I can, be loud at an interview and impress people. And I think, sometimes I listen to myself and I'm like, am I not really an introvert? What if I was wrong my whole life and I was just not fully flourished because I didn't work with a therapist until I was 35 or something like that? What if I just grew up thinking, oh, I'm introverted, and I just had all these inhibitions and complexes? Who knows? Go figure, right? But again, here I am talking to you, but again, I'm basically talking to a camera. I'm alone in my room and I'm just, looking at myself at the front camera, so I feel comfortable. And then I'm I already have 5,000 subscribers. 5,000 people watch my videos. It's insane. Thank you for being here. Oh, I also wanted to say that I don't watch the news. I'm very particular about the movies that I watch, again, because if I watch something scary, I won't sleep. And when I was younger, I liked thrillers. I do love a good thriller. I watched, the X-Files with my dad. That was my favorite. And Who Killed Laura Palmer? What was that one? Twin Peaks, right? And now, I can watch a good thriller, but I have to be very careful. There are also topics that I try to avoid, I don't like watching anything with little kids as victims and some other topics. And I don't watch the news. My mom always reprimands me for not knowing what is going on in the world, and I'm if it's something big, I will see it somewhere on somebody's Instagram story. I know maybe it's not responsible to not watch the news, but I have to preserve myself, you guys. I have to keep making artwork, keep making videos for you. I can't, people in the United States are very politically responsible. They care about, so the election just happened last month, and there was this whole talk about the election, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, and I'm I don't care. I do care to a certain extent, right? But I have to choose. You have to choose your battles, right? So are you an HSP as well, or do you know one? Share in the comments below. I'm sending you support. Please know that you are not alone and there is nothing wrong with us. This is my second video for the bookshelf playlist. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button. Videos on books take a lot of time to prepare. Don't forget to subscribe, share your thoughts, ask questions in the comments, and remember, reading is what? Fundamental.